The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion is the first game where I completed 100% of the achievements. It was the first game that I spent over 400 hours in game, smashing my previous record of about 240. I used to dream about Oblivion. Hell, I used to daydream about Oblivion. But I know for a fact I wouldn't have if I hadn't found the cheats or exploits to get around the tedious grind or horrific difficulty spikes caused by the insane level scaling and design flaws that this game suffers from. But this leads me to wonder if Oblivion is actually good. Well, at least its story is. The narrative and mission dialogue are excellent and engaging. I also like the fact that it's a hybrid of a Chosen One story. You get to play as the person who initially gets the ball rolling, and then play a key role in the following events. It feels more like a snowball effect, where you play as the core driving force of a larger group, instead of the overpowered boulder soloing down the peaks of Skyrim. I honestly found myself way more intrigued and immersed in the relatively short story, even more so than I did in Skyrim. Also found the factions fairly interesting. The highlight, of course, is the legendary Dark Brotherhood questline, where you earn your way up the ranks through cleverly designed assassination missions, as opposed to effectively being the head of the faction on your first day. Non-faction missions are also interesting, some requiring exploration, espionage, and persuasion in ways that I think Skyrim fails to live up to. However, Oblivion's gameplay doesn't hold up well compared to its successor. I'm not gonna lie, I did cheat a little in my most recent playthrough, but once I got through that money I'd collected, I tried to play the game honestly without intentionally min-maxing my skills, or making myself OP by using 100% chameleon or 100% damage reflection or reducing the difficulty slider. This required me to use my resources far more strategically than Skyrim, and the temptation of cheating loomed heavy over my head throughout. This is largely because resources are far more sparse and generally more expensive in relation to the typical money you can make in-game. The awful leveling system wasn't great at the time, let alone now, and it just wasn't until I reached Kvatch where I kinda realized the snowball effect. The hero of Kvatch isn't a one-man army. They are an above-average soldier at best, and I would need companions in order to fight tougher fights. This doesn't stop the level scaling issue, as even quest rewards can scale with you, and you run the risk of hitting your own allies, but it definitely helps and makes leveling up a bit more bearable. While the overall fighting mechanics is more clunky than Skyrim, it also provides a much broader tool belt. You can make a 100% reflect character, an invisible character, or stun enemies completely by draining their stamina. None of these require the same level of exploitation as similar abilities in Skyrim, and you're also able to craft spells in addition to enchanting weapons. I also didn't fully realize the effectiveness of some of the spells or abilities until I explored their capabilities, leading to a fairly interesting and more strategic experience, despite the monotony of combat in general. But one thing that Oblivion does have going for it is the fact that Curator feels alive. While the use of Radiant AI has spawned 1,000 memes, it makes Oblivion feel unlike any other game before or since. This is in large part due to the voice work. While they might not always be consistent, Bethesda picked a fairly solid cast of voice actors for the game. The music is also solid, like 10 out of 10 stuff, but it is generally more relaxing than Skyrim. However, visually, Oblivion hasn't held up particularly well. While I personally think that the world looks fine, I acknowledge that it doesn't line up with established lore. It's also hard to not notice the most notable and memeable visual aesthetic, which of course is the faces. Unfortunately, Oblivion doesn't do particularly well in accessibility either. Though it does have subtitles, there's no in-game way to change either the spoken or written language. There are difficulty options, however these are tied to nondescript sliders, and you can still fall victim to the level scaling issue, though to a much lesser extent. Add that to the remappable controls, and I think that most players will be able to play the game, though I honestly hate the fact that it doesn't have native controller support, which could seriously hinder some people with mobility issues. Oblivion isn't near as available as its successor, only being available physically on Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, and digitally on GOG and Steam. Oh, and it's also important to note that you can play it on modern Xbox consoles through their backwards compatibility. I also experienced some bugs, many of which are fixed in fan-made patches. None of them were game-breaking, but it's still inexcusable, really. The menus are fairly extensive, though admittedly ugly, but the game should work on most computers without any problems. Overall, Oblivion has a certain charm that Skyrim doesn't, while maintaining a similar appeal. However, the leveling system offers a significant wall that can destroy any playthrough. With a couple of mods, Oblivion would be a must-play, but I have to judge a game based on what's there, and I think Oblivion earns a decent. So let me know what you think about Oblivion down in the comments below. Check out my last review on BioShock and consider subscribing. Until then, this has been Rob the Slob, and I'll see you in the virtual commute.